Hello, brothers and sisters. Thanks for joining. Hey, today I want to talk about Trump federalizing Washington, D.C., and just go through that and see, is Trump just being his normal hyperbolic self, lying about everything? Because he does, 100%. He just says the craziest stuff with not worrying too much about whether it's true or not. So I saw this story floating around on the internet, and I decided I'd go right to the source. I don't really go to Truth Social very much, but I came here because I wanted to see exactly what Trump had to say. Because part of my purpose here on making these is I want to get the news and just stories out that you don't see in mainstream media, and that means they're generally um, uh, positive for the right, negative for the left, because everyone in the mainstream media are on the left. So you're seeing all their stories. So people might think I'm very right wing, and maybe so based on the stories I and the way I talk about them. But I actually think I'm kind of in the middle. I think I'm just a normie talking about stuff, and I'm definitely a libertarian, I would say, and I don't like either party actually. But I have to live in this world, so you just got to make do with what you think is best for you and for your family and for your community, and so that's what I do. And then the other thing I like to do is I don't like to get all emotional about stuff like the activists do. I like to actually look at the facts, what actually happened, and then kind of review it, and then make a kind of conclusion about it based on facts, not on emotions. That's kind of how I work. So if you like that, like and subscribe. If you don't like that, don't watch me. No problem. Nobody watches me anyway. So this one I think is about big balls, right? So Trump. Why did Trump say he was going to federalize Washington D.C.? It's because he said crime's out of control, and I think he said it's young gangs aren't being held to account, something like that. Youngsters or young criminals are really running amok, basically. And I'm paraphrasing, but that's what I think. And so this came to Trump's personal attention because Big Balls was assaulted, and looking at this picture, somebody beat the shit out of him. And so, and the way I understand the story is he was just walking somewhere in Washington D.C. He saw a woman being carjacked, and he decided to intervene and help her. Now, it turned out there was like 10 youths there, and they just beat the shit out of him. So it might not have been the smartest thing to do to try to stop the carjacking. It's too bad Washington D.C. isn't like Texas, and he wouldn't be able to have been armed and have a gun, because 1 against 10 he needed one. Obviously, I mean, look at him, right? And so Trump is taking this as a soft on crime kind of thing. And whether you like big balls or not, it was funny for a while there. He definitely trolled the mainstream media, getting them to all say that on national TV. It was a Bart Simpson, calling up Moe's kind of moment, hearing these talking heads talking about big balls. And again, that was his like moniker on the internet. And I'm not defending anything Big Balls has done other than this. Like, he made the news because he was part of Elon Musk's Doge, and people went out and looked at what he had said a few years ago, and he definitely said a bunch of racist things. But then he was fired. His boss at Doge fired him, I believe, or he resigned over the big stink. But then Pete Hegseth and Elon both came in and said, you know what, he said some stupid things, but it shouldn't ruin his life, something like that. And they rehired him. And so this isn't about that. Just FYI, I'm not. I have no idea whether this is a good guy or a bad guy in general, but I do applaud that he would try to help this woman that was being carjacked at the risk of his own safety. And so I'm just talking about that act. And if that means he's a Nazi and I'm a Nazi for thinking it's good to try to defend a woman that's being carjacked, then so be it. I'm a Nazi. And he's a Nazi, so be it. But I think it was the right thing to do. I wish that I would have the courage to do what he did, to take on a gang of 10 and try to help this woman. That's maybe one of the reasons I don't want to go to Washington D.C. In Texas, somebody probably would have got shot in that situation. Let's just put it that way. All right, so let's get back to the story. So I'm just going to read it from the top. Donald Trump 18 hours ago. This is August 8th, by the way. So 18 hours ago, Donald Trump said, Edward, the crime situation in Washington, just like our southern border, where zero illegals entered in the last 3 months, will be a safe place very soon. Thank you for your bravery. Stay tuned. Yeah, Trump always likes to get his kudos in. He likes to give himself kudos. Every time he can, he slips in, the things that he thinks he's done that are good for America. Whether you agree with them or not doesn't matter. He likes to get that in. And I guess the guy's name's Edward then. I just knew he was big balls. All right, so then 2 days ago, Trump first sent this out. Let's see what Trump said 2 days ago. Crime in Washington, D.C. is totally out of control. Local Utes, I love my cousin Vinny. Local Utes and gang members, some 14, 15, 16-year-olds are randomly attacking, mugging, maiming, and shooting innocent citizens at the same time, knowing they will almost immediately be released. I can't disagree. I mean, look, I'm just looking at the picture. Somebody beat the shit out of him. They are not afraid of law enforcement because they know nothing ever happens to them, but it's going to happen now. The law in D.C. must be changed to prosecute these minors as adults and lock them up for a long time, starting at age 14. The most recent victim was beaten mercilessly by local thugs. Washington, D.C. must be safe, clean, beautiful for all of America, for all Americans, and importantly for the world to see. If D.C. doesn't get its act together quickly, we will have no choice but to take federal control of the city and run this city how it should be run, and put criminals on notice that they're not going to get away with it anymore. Perhaps it should have been done a long time ago. Then this incredible young man and so many others would not have had to go through the horrors of violent crime. If this continues, I'm going to exert my powers and federalize this city, make America great again. All right, so I got to say, I completely agree with everything he just said. American cities need to be safe, all of them. Americans need to be safe, and tourists who come to America need to be safe. Everyone should be safe when they're walking the streets in America. And my personal opinion is what's happened here is these soft on crime policies are what leads to this. The mayors and the DAs in a lot of these big cities are like, oh well, we got to look at these are like underprivileged youths, and it's not their fault and stuff like that. It's just like the sentencing guidelines that they tried to push through in the UK. We have to look at a person's circumstances and their race and where they're from and all these things when sentencing, and then. You know what? He's really a good kid. So all these apologists for the criminals, the thugs. No, put a few of them in jail. That's how you stop this. It's sort of like what happened in Florida. All the protesters were getting crazy and not being peaceful protesters. They were all blocking the roads and attacking cars and doing stuff like that. And they were doing it all over the country in all these cities. And Florida said, hey, the governor said, if you get run over, pretty much it's your fault, protester, because I'm on the side, and law enforcement's going to be on the side of citizens in fear for their safety when you're attacking their car. And so if they run you over, that's your fault. And guess what happened in Florida? People didn't get run over. Well, I don't know for sure. Maybe some did, but not very much. I don't remember seeing it in the news anyway. But send me a link if there were some people run over. But what happened? Protesters started standing on the public sidewalks and protesting where they should be and staying out of the streets. You should only be blocking streets in a peaceful protest if you've got, I believe, if you've got like a permit to block the street and the police are there to help with traffic control and things like that. If you don't have that in place, it's not safe to block the streets for you or for the people driving their cars. So I fully support doing that, and so that's why people don't speed as much as they might, because you might get a ticket. But if you're going to let all the kids out, they know they're juveniles, 14, 15, 16, and so they know that they can't really be prosecuted, or they won't really be prosecuted, then they get away with the stuff, and these bad kids turn into bad adults. So we got to nip this in the bud. Throw a few of them in jail, give their parents huge fines, do something, change the laws, do something. And I'm not saying charge them as adults and throw them in jail for 20 years or something, but this is 100% assault. I would put a kid who was involved in this. I'd give him, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I'd give him 4 or 5 years in a juvenile detention facility for this. Do that to a couple of kids, this stuff would stop. Anyway, so rant off. Let's get back to the story. So can Trump even do this? Because I know the people with Trump derangement syndrome will say this is illegal and he's acting like a king again, and they'll say all that. But can he do this? So I haven't read this yet, but I just went out and I found this article from Al Jazeera. So I figured this, might be fair and balanced, so a little bit. And I do try to stay away from overtly conservative news sites, because I do like to try to get different opinions. And Al Jazeera is out of the Middle East. So I've not read this, but let's see what Al Jazeera has to say about it. And I'll link this story in the notes. So can Donald Trump take federal control of Washington, D.C.? U.S. President has warned of a federal takeover of D.C., citing violent incidents in the city's and the city's crime problems. Yeah, because see, Washington, D.C. is not a normal city, right? Because Washington, D.C. is not a state. It's a federal district, is what I remember from civics class when I was growing up. So the rules around Washington, D.C. are different than the rules around states, because it's not part of a state. And the laws in states all come down from the state, and then also from the federal government for some things, but predominantly the powers of cities are related to the power the states give the municipalities. But in this case, it's a little different. So let's see what's involved here. All right, so Louis Jacobson and Samantha Putterman wrote this, and they're with PolitiFact, August 7th. So they wrote this yesterday. After a group of teenagers severely beat a prominent employee of President Donald Trump's Department of Government Efficiency in an attempted carjacking in Washington, D.C., Trump threatened a federal takeover of the nation's capital. Trump shared an image on August 5th on Truth Social of a bloodied Edward Korstein, also known by his online alias Big Balls. I love it. Trump and Elon love to troll people. I love it. If DC doesn't get its act together quickly, we will have no choice but to take federal control of the city and run this city how it should be run, and put criminals on notice that they're not going to get away with it anymore, Trump wrote. Perhaps it should have been done long ago. Then this incredible young man and so many others would not have had to go through the horrors of violent crime. If this continues, I'm going to exert my powers and federalize this city, make America great. So we actually read the actual post already, because I don't like to just rely on the snippets that people put in the actual stories, because I think sometimes they're selectively edited. But I would say that paragraph seems fair and true compared to what we just read a minute ago. Trump repeated the idea to reporters on August 6th, saying he was going to look at revoking the city's home rule, citing the attack on Korstein. Data shows that in recent years, the district has had significant crime problem, but offenses such as homicide, gun-related, aggravated assault, carjacking, vehicle theft, robbery, and sexual assault have declined from the COVID-19 peaks. Now, one thing I would say about that, just FYI, this is kind of off this story. I've read a couple other stories recently that the police union in Washington, D.C. is investigating the police leadership, because it's being alleged right now, and there's an investigation going on. The police leadership has been underreporting crime so that there's not as many felonies showing up and undercharging offenses just to make it look like crime is lower than it is. So that I have seen that reported. I'm not going to go find the story, but the crime statistics for Washington, D.C. are suspect. But a big question remains, can Trump undertake a federal takeover of the District of Columbia? Experts say it is possible, but not necessarily simple. He'd have to get Congress to agree. Yeah, that's what I actually expected. I expect that there is some federal law governing Washington, D.C., and that Trump will have to abide by. But, there's always wiggle room in federal law if a president, wants to do something. So what is DC's home rule? The United States Constitution created the District of Columbia as a 10 square mile seat of federal government. Because the district is not a state, its residents lack full congressional representation. It has one House delegate who cannot vote on the floor and no senators. Yeah, this is just the way it was set up. So if you live in Washington, D.C., you technically have no true representation. You've got one non-voting member, but he doesn't have a vote or she doesn't have a vote. So it is not like the rest of America from a legal perspective. For about a century, until 1973, the city was run by 3 presidentially appointed commissioners. That year, President Nixon signed the Home Rule Act, enabling district residents to elect a mayor and city council. Okay, so it sounds like the current form of government in Washington, D.C. goes back to 73. 52 years ago. While the Home Rule law granted the district significant autonomy for local governance, the city still answers to Congress on certain matters, including budget, oversight, and the ability to overturn local legislation. So yeah, it looks like the federal Congress in Washington, D.C., so the House of Representatives and the Senate, in effect, act as like the de facto state legislature there. Since 1974, and indeed for all of DC's histories, members of Congress have interfered in city affairs to fiddle with everything from how long pools are open to banning the city from using its own tax money for a needle exchange program, said George Derek Musgrove, a University of Maryland, Baltimore County historian. All right, so there's a long history of politicians, throwing their weight around in DC. What does it mean to federalize DC? Trump hasn't detailed how federalization would work or said whether there are specific services he wants to take over. Legal scholars agree, given the explicit language in the Constitution, that Trump cannot simply take over the district and oust its home rule elected leadership. He would have to work with Congress, the entity entrusted with overseeing the Capitol. Congress may exercise this authority, not exercise it or delegate it, Musgrove said. With the Home Rule Act of 73, it delegated a good bit of that authority, though not all, to a local government. It would have to act to reclaim that authority or to delegate it to another entity like the executive branch. Congress's Republican majorities have so far supported Trump's agenda with near unanimity, but a repeal of home rule isn't a sure thing. It would need to win passage in the House, which Republicans narrowly control, and where Trump might be able to enforce his will with the majority, but it also would need to clear the Senate, which would take 60 votes. So yeah, if he needs 60 to get past the filibuster rules, I don't think Trump can actually get the law changed. Including at least 7 Democratic votes to proceed to final consideration. Democrats have generally been supportive of home rule for the district. Yeah, of course, it's mostly liberals that live there. Come on, and I say that because if I remember right, Washington D.C. Voted in the popular vote was something like 93% for Harris and 7%. So yeah, of course, Democrats like the way things are. In February, Senator Mike Lee and Representative Andrew Ogles introduced legislation to repeal home rule, but the measure has only 3 Senate co-sponsors and 3 House co-sponsors. According to the Constitution, Congress makes the laws for the district, said the University of North Carolina law professor Michael Gerart. Gerhardt, sorry. If Trump wants to feed, or if Trump wants to federalize DC in order for him to wipe out its Democratic leadership and replace it with people who are loyal only to him, that strikes me precisely as what the framers did not want. Okay, so this is a very partisan statement there. Trump isn't, saying he wants to wipe out Democratic leadership and put his own people in to take to take over. He wants to stop crime, and I know you might say that he's really just trying to take over, but no, I think he's actually trying to stop crime. They're not the same things. This was a very partisan biased statement by this professor. Shame on you. He very liberal professor based on that statement. So I usually take people at their word. And Trump is very, out there. He'll tell you if he wants to take over because he wants to get rid of the Democrats. And but I haven't actually seen that yet. And maybe he does. Maybe he's been saying that. But I do agree. I want crime to be fixed there. And if the mayor can't do it with the resources she has, I think it's a woman, then yeah, let's have Trump help out. Short of a law, the president has other ways to exert influence in the district, including the authority to mobilize the D.C. National Guard without local consent. That's a possibility he floated in remarks to reporters on August 6th. Yeah, so the D.C. National Guard reports directly to the president, so he can actually order them onto the streets anytime he wants for any reason. Basically, I think he can declare an emergency and it's done. The Home Rule Act also allows the president to assume temporary control over the city's police department in an emergency, something Trump threatened to do in 2020 amid national protests for George Floyd. So there we go. This is kind of like the War Powers Act, right? He can temporarily take over the police, just like with the military. He can deploy troops for a certain amount of time before he, under the War Powers Act, has to tell Congress. And by the way, I'll jump in on that. I actually think the War Powers Act is unconstitutional. I think the president does not have to get approval from Congress for committing troops. I don't think the framers of the Constitution ever intended that. So I think if any president ever fights the War Powers Act in court, I think the War Powers Act will be ruled unconstitutional. But that's a different story. So far, all presidents have complied with the War Powers Act because it's actually pretty easy to comply with. It really doesn't put much of a constraint on presidential military power. So what has Trump said about this? Trump has talked broadly since his 24 campaign about expanding the federal government's powers over the district, including enhanced oversight and direct management. During the March 2023 Conservative Political Action Conference, Trump spoke about driving through the district, lamenting the dirty roads. It looked like somebody just took their garbage and just threw it all over the highways and the Beltway. It's disgraceful, disgusting. Frankly, the federal government should take control. I completely agree. All of these liberal-run cities are shitholes. You tell me one that doesn't have people defecating in the streets, trash in the streets not getting picked up. Name me one large city that isn't that way. Put it in the comments and I'll go and look and see if you're right, and I'll do a follow-up on whatever I find about that city. But I don't believe there's any large liberal-run city that's being run right now. Yeah, and again, it's because of soft on crime policies mostly. It's you got to stop the nonsense. Look, I think in Washington state, they're recriminalizing drugs because of all the problems it caused by decriminalizing. It's like, I get it. You want to help people, but you've got to enforce the laws. You have to, or bad things happen. During a July 2024 Florida campaign rally, Trump promised to take over the horribly run capital of our nation and clean it up, renovate it, rebuild our capital city so it's no longer a nightmare of murder and crime, but rather it become the most beautiful capital anywhere in the world. Yeah, I want all of our cities to be beautiful. I want people to be able to walk down the streets safe. Americans and foreign tourists should be able to walk the streets safely. Like, you walk around in Al Jazeera. I think Al Jazeera is sponsored by I think it's run out of the UAE, and I could be wrong about that, but it's one of those countries over there. Those countries are beautiful. There's no dirt, there's no crime because they're hard on crime. That's why they run beautiful cities. And if you act a knucklehead, they come down super hard on you. That's what's needed if you want to have nice things. Trump echoed this on in February, again focusing on blight and crime. I think the federal government should take over the governance of DC and run it really, really properly. I agree. If the current leadership is not doing the job, we need it replaced with somebody who can do the job. In March, Trump signed an executive order establishing the DC Safe and Beautiful Task Force. It mandates beautification efforts such as graffiti removal and enhanced park maintenance. It includes provisions to address violent crime and issues related to homelessness. In a July cabinet meeting, Trump pitched the idea again. We have tremendous power at the White House to run places where we have to. We could run DC. I mean, we're looking at DC. We don't want crime in DC. We want the city run well. Has home rule been revoked before? There is a precedent for removing home rule powers, but not recently. In 1874, local conservatives, angry about voting rights for local blacks and working class white residents, teamed up with opponents of Reconstruction era voting in the South and some of their northern allies to roll back democratic laws in the district, Musgrove said. The changes lasted until Nixon signed the Home Rule Bill a century later. A repeal of home rule would not be popular with Washingtonians. In 24, Trump won less than 6.5% of the district's vote. Yeah, less than 6.5. I said 7, so I was spot on there. While no city is perfect, district has built a functioning city government under home rule, Musgrove said. There's no question the people would be mad. Yeah, they would. But me personally, I don't care if they're mad. If the city is crime ridden, we need to do something about it. If the city is dirty, we need to do something about it. And as it's a federal district, the federal government does have control over it. So Congress does have control over it. So yeah, I would like to see Trump do something here. I'm sure he's got his lawyers reviewing what he legally can do, and he'll probably write an executive order soon, I expect, with what he wants done. So, my understanding is he's got a couple of things he can do. Just to tick them off really quick again. So he can deploy the National Guard, and I don't think there's really any. I don't think there's any constraints on what he can do there. Really, he can go have them fight crime, and basically he can pretty much give them arrest powers, and then I would expect they would have to take the arrestees and turn them over to local police. Now the problem would be if the DA didn't prosecute, but I think that would probably fit in with the home rule laws. He could take complete control over the police. In the short run, I believe he can take them over for like 30 days or something. The law says something about that in a declared emergency. And he declared emergencies on the border for drugs and immigration. So he's known to do this. Problem again there is going to be the DAs. So if the local DAs are not on board, they'll just release the criminals. But he has tools there too, because he can work on defunding those DAs and things like that. There are, money that the executive branch gives to the city of Washington. He can find a way to stop the funds from flowing. So he can pressure them if they're not doing what he wants them to do. He can also mobilize federal law enforcement, right? He can take the FBI and DEA and put them out on the streets. They have arrest powers, and there are lots of federal laws. Like the DEA can start enforcing drug crime in the city. That would be legal, and then he could, he could take those actually to federal courts if he did that. And same thing with the FBI. There are laws I'm sure the FBI could deploy. In order to arrest people. But my guess is most of the arrests, again, will be similar to state arrests, and they'll have to be turned over to the local Washington DA, not the federal attorney. But we'll see. And then I guess, the last thing he can do is get Congress to act. But I think that'll be really hard because he needs the 60 votes, right? So that's what I'm thinking. And the Trump detractors again will come out and say he's acting like an emperor, an autocrat. He'll say this is all racial because I do believe a large percentage of the population that live in Washington D.C. is black. I could be wrong, but because of that, I'm positive that they'll say it's racial. But I don't believe it is racial. It's he wants to stop crime. I'm going to take him at his word on that. Anyways, that's what I thought, and that's what's possible. All right. So with that, I think I've said enough. Now you've heard what I think about it. Let me know what you think about it. And if you like it, hey, subscribe. If you don't like it, don't watch me. Talk to you guys later. Bye.